Alrighty, folks. Yes, recordings in progress in the meeting. Our forum is about to begin. So welcome to this third uh, warrant article workshop. Michael, you were the first one, right? You accompanied
Yeah,
Doug, right? Yeah, yeah. And then you ran the second one all by yourself. Little did you know that was like a kind of like a audition for the town council job, and you got it. So Michael Cunningham is now our new-ish town council, and he took a real delight in participating in the first two warrant article workshops. I was really impressed with his enthusiasm for them and just talking with residents about the process of creating a good article. And so Michael, even in his new role, as town council, is enthusiastic to join us again. So Michael, we're very grateful, and I'll turn it over to you now to do a presentation and then handle the Q&A. All righty.
sounds good. I just want to thank Select Board Member Lynn Diggins and the Civic Engagement Group for the invitation to be here tonight. I do enjoy this stuff. I do enjoy this process, and the warrant article season is almost upon us, and I'm excited for that. And I appreciate all of you being here to participate in the workshop. And if you have any ideas about what you'd like to do or warrant articles that you think might be a good idea for the upcoming spring annual town meeting, I'm happy to serve as a resource and help you in that process in any way that I can. I'm going to go through a slideshow tonight that sets forth the background. I recognize some of the names on the call here. I know some of you know all this stuff. It's good as a reminder, I guess, for those who aren't as familiar. Hopefully it's helpful. And at the end, as Mr. Diggins mentioned, we'll be taking questions or anything people want to talk about. We're happy to do that at the end. I'll try and move through it fairly quickly. It is my third year doing this, but if I try to be as succinct as I can. So bear with me 1 second. I'm trying to share my screen, which is sometimes a challenge.
Yep, looks good, Michael.
All right. Introduction. You know, as Len mentioned, I am the newly named town council for the town of Arlington. I've worked for the town for about 3 years. I've been an attorney for about 23 years. But I love being in Arlington. I love this community. I really enjoy this job and happy to have the new position. Let's see if I can get rid of that. Oh. So first is the Massachusetts Treaty of Home Rule. Cities and towns are political subdivisions of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And there's some discussion in this bullet point about the early to mid 1900s about the Dillon Rule. For those who are interested, Dillon was an Iowa state judge who back in the mid 19th century came up with this rule that essentially took a lot of power away from municipalities and provided it to the states. And my understanding of the history of that was it's somewhat interesting. I'll take a brief side note here. I think it was mostly related to the railroads, and the powerful railroad interests did not like having to deal with individual towns and communities and rather deal with the state. And so that the state lost a lot of its authority to legislate on its own. So towns could only exercise limited self-governance as allowed by the state. And this created some chaos. There were dozens of highly localized state legislative acts allowing the town to make a real estate transaction or purchase uniforms. That was adopted by the federal level by a Supreme Court case in 1907. And so Massachusetts was in a spot where it was really difficult for communities like Arlington to deal with its own issues and legislate and control its own destiny. That changed with and I think it's on the next slide, 1966. This references it, Article 89, the Home Rule Procedures Act, which is also Chapter 43A of our state law, and Home Rule Amendment, so Article 89 to our state constitution, 1966, that reinvested municipalities with authority in three chief forms: general legislative power, special legislation home rule petition powers, and home rule charters. And this just sets forth the trinity of home rule and how the power that individual communities like Arlington got back by virtue of this legislative act, Chapter 43A, and the amendment to the state constitution in Section 89. So we can do it through bylaws, the local legislative. We do through home rule petition. We'll talk more about that later. The special legislation. Or most importantly was the establishment of the home rule charter, local constitution rule. And it doesn't, that slide doesn't talk about it, but just in brief, the local constitution rule. So communities had the opportunity to set up a charter, how they wish to govern itself. In Arlington, we came up with our Town Manager Act, which is the foundation for our local government, and everything upon which the things like our zoning bylaws and bylaws, general bylaws, flow from. So governmental powers of cities and towns. Any city or town may, by the adoption, amendment, or repeal of local ordinances or bylaws, exercise any power or function which the general court has power to confer upon it, which is not inconsistent with the Constitution or laws enacted by the general court in conformity with powers reserved to the general court by Section 8, and which is not denied either expressly or by clear implication to the city or town by its charter. I would focus on number 1. So that's one of the important things that you want to think of when you're considering a warrant article. We cannot take actions in Arlington that are inconsistent with state law. And what happens is after town meeting occurs, and I know our town clerk is here, all the bylaw amendments or zoning bylaw amendments that are passed have to go to the Attorney General's municipal law unit, and that unit of government evaluates our bylaws for any conflict with state law. And to the extent that they do, they will not be permitted. They'll be disallowed. So that's an upfront consideration for anybody that's thinking about a warrant article. Section 7 of Article 89 also limits the types of things that we can do in a warrant article. We can't regulate elections. We can't levy, assess, or collect taxes, borrow money, or pledge the credit the city or town, dispose of parkland, enact private or civil law governing civil relationship, except as an incident to an exercise of independent municipal power, and or define and provide for the punishment of a felony, or to impose imprisonment as a punishment for any violation of law, not law. So those are some of the things that specifically have set forth that are reserved to the state to determine for Arlington. Those are not things that we can legislate through town meeting. Arlington basics. So that's really the 50s is when it kind of came about, but it was really legally permitted by virtue of the 1966 action of the state legislature, the Town Manager Act. That's available on town website. I encourage, our town website's excellent. I encourage anyone to read that. That's actually the least voluminous of our legal law basing documents. It's a useful read and be helpful if you're thinking about drafting a warrant article. The number of legislative acts affecting the town, there are numerous, and that's something that I can help people with if you have questions as you go through the initial process of thinking about topics that might be ripe for your warrant article. And this is just what we established is we have a select board obviously in town. We're fortunate to have a member of that select board with us tonight. Representative town meeting, I think, and Len, you can correct me if I'm wrong, are there 220 town meeting members?
252. 252. 21 seat precincts times 12 town meeting members per precinct.
252. So just in general, this isn't in my slides, but I know some of you know this stuff, but town meeting is essentially the town's legislative body. There are a lot of, the town form of government. There are some towns in Massachusetts that have an open town meeting where any citizen who's registered to vote can go and just, cast their vote on matters that are before the town meeting. Arlington has chosen to do an elected form of town meeting, so you have to be an elected member to vote at town meeting. You can still speak at town meeting if you're introduced by a town meeting member and you're you're permitted by the body, but you can't vote unless you're an elected member. And the election's coming up this spring if anyone's interested. Strong manager, I think that's a term that I would use to describe the Town Manager Act in Arlington. I think it's language more than most places great power within the office of the town manager. More, like I said, more so than some other towns and communities. What is the warrant? So that's where we get into general law section, chapter 39. First of all, the warrant is what's a document, but it must state the time and place of the town meeting and the subjects to be acted upon. So the process, think of a big picture. The warrant is opening for submissions this Friday, December 8th. And that's if you have a particular matter of interest, you have an idea, you come up with a warrant article, and you want it to be placed on the warrant. That's your first step, is to submit that through on December 8th. You have until the end of February, the end of January to do that, the last Friday in January. The warrant must also say the subjects to be acted upon. So if your article makes it all the way through the process, there's a hearing process through the spring, it may end up on the warrant that's considered by town meeting. The warrant articles are not the verbatim language of a vote or motion at town meeting. So your warrant article is just simply an idea. It's usually 2 or 3 sentences long. It's not the motion itself. So if you're looking to amend a bylaw and you want to talk about specific provisions, that's a draft motion that you could submit to, like, say your warrant article is going to be heard by the select board or by the redevelopment board. So those, you may want to submit draft motion language with it, which sets out more clearly and exactly what you're trying to change. But the warrant article is not the verbatim language. You just want to keep a brief idea, give the public an idea of what you're seeking to do, and that's really what the warrant's about. The warrant article is, like it said in the next section, sufficient description of what is proposed so as to adequately warn the inhabitants of the town. And every action town meeting must be within the scope of the article in the warrant. So if something's not on the warrant, it's not properly before town meeting. The town meeting is really constricted in terms of what it could consider, and the warrant article process and the hearing process associated with warrant articles is pretty stringent and can be lengthy. And the reason for that is they want to make sure that business is properly before the town meeting. This is a helpful, let's look at big picture and also a nice picture of the hall. The different types of warrant articles that you'd be thinking about for the spring, essentially there are 6. You've got town bylaws and amendments. That's also available on the website. That's a much lengthier document. Depending on the particular section of law or bylaw that you're interested in, it's easy to find, it's easy to search. It's also a useful source. I think I would recommend people refer to that when they're considering different issues. Local options, and I'll go into that in one of the future slides, about a little bit more about what that is. Resolutions, home rule petitions or special legislation, budgets and appropriations, and then zoning bylaws and amendments, which, for anybody who was at our special town meeting in the fall, that's pretty much exclusively with zoning bylaws and amendments, which are tough. A little more description on each of those 6 topics. So town bylaws and bylaw amendments. Those are municipal ordinances exercising general legislative powers. So these are the basic details of local governance, when the warrant will be open, when we hold elections, what committees and commissions are locally established, and what are the duties and powers. Local public health and safety ordinances are contained in the bylaws. I know we've done the regulation of plastic bags in the past, prohibition on feeding waterfowl. More recently, we've done warrant articles that are, the town bylaw and bylaw amendments related to leaf blowers. There were other ones that we worked on related to, the bunch of different issues. I'm sorry. Zoning bylaw and bylaw amendments. Those are what we dealt with a lot of those in the fall special town meeting, but you can do that. If we want to consider those in the spring, you can pursue those now as well. Those are local land use regulations for purposes allowed under Chapter 40A, because that's the Zoning Act, the state law and its predecessors. So the zoning bylaws are a separate document on the town's website. They're not the town bylaws, and those deal with those particular issues related to land use and regulation. And they must be oriented towards land and its uses and furtherance of health, safety, and welfare of the town. Specific regulations are prohibited, so you can't do subjects of building code, building interior applications, religious and educational institutions, agriculture uses, or no spot zoning. Additional procedural limits and consequences. So the zoning bylaws, just in general, can be a bit more tricky, but they're in addition to the town council's office, there are a lot of resources available in town. We can talk to the community planning development director. We can deal with the redevelopment board. They're really helpful. So even if we're going initial stages, there are individuals we can reach out to with specific subject matter expertise beyond procedural help that I can provide that can be of assistance to anyone who has an interest in any of these particular areas. Now, I'd say we're getting into a couple. I know that we went through I talked about 6 different types of warrant articles. These are the less common. Local options, they're an option afforded to local government that requires having approval option, special taxes, exemptions, special funding and spending mechanisms, delegation of other legislative powers of the Commonwealth. We don't see those as much on the town warrant in any particular given year, but those are things that the state government does that affords and allows opportunities for municipalities to take advantage of something they want to, provide from the state level. So we have an opportunity in a particular year for the town to, want to approve or adopt these particular provisions. I wouldn't say this is something of particular interest to a general citizen who's thinking about a warrant article. These are more for town government issues. Finance articles, those are the budgets, borrowing, specific appropriations, those types of articles. And you can think of this as, where is my warrant article going to go? If you're doing something related to the bylaws in general, that's something that Len and the select board are most likely to consider. You'll probably have a hearing before that board. If you have a zoning article, that typically would go before the redevelopment board. And then the finance articles go before the finance committee. And so if you have hearings, and these, even if you don't have a warrant article you're thinking about drafting or submitting, these are great places to go in the spring to understand and attend those hearings. You can participate in those usually by Zoom, and understand what's going to happen at town meeting. They're very informative, and the boards they're experts in their particular fields. It's really interesting stuff. As Len knows, I love this stuff, but maybe I'm just strange. Next is home rule petitions or special legislation. We do see these quite a bit. So this is something that seeking authority preempted, otherwise restricted in our home rule. So this is something we can't do with our bylaws, but we want the state to help us with. So we ask the state, by virtue of our motion, we ask our state delegation, so Representative Garbely or Representative Rogers, or to file a particular legislation at the State House, and we've done that quite a bit. It's particular issues like the firefighters over 40 may conflict with state law, but they can make an exception if we pass special legislation. Fossil fuels, we did that in the fall. Income-based tax relief or ranked choice voting and other topics that we've dealt with by home rule petition. That is something that we see quite a bit. And if you have ideas related to that, that is an option if you've got something that conflicts with state law. Resolutions, these are non-binding matters. So usually we have 3 or 4 of these in the spring. The town resolves to essentially make a statement on some particular topic. It's not something that has the effect of law or a bylaw. And I think the new moderator has, Greg Christina does a great job. He's limited debate on these issues. I think usually his rules are one pro and one con for resolution matters, but otherwise they try and limit the amount of time that we spend on those. They're useful to make a statement for the town, but they're not useful in the sense that it's not changing anything that we do legally. The matters are placed on the warrant. So they can be placed by the select board directly. And essentially that's what people need to understand when they submit a warrant article, that the warrant is really controlled by the select board. You're essentially making a request that the select board consider your warrant article, and they have their hearing, and then they can say, well, we as a board, we support this warrant article, and we suggest favorable action for town meeting. Then it's up to town meeting. Or select board could say, we suggest no action, or and it still goes to town meeting that there's no motion at that point. There are procedural mechanisms that people can exercise at town meeting itself if they're a member to try and create a substitute motion. But I think that's the big thing you have to remember. The select board really controls what's on the warrant. Some articles are asserted at the request of the finance committee, the superintendent of schools, the manager. But again, those articles, they have to go through one of the committees and ultimately are funneled through the select board's authority. The mechanism by which most people, I think, on this call are gonna, if they're gonna pursue a warrant article, is to vote a petition. And for the annual town meeting in the spring, you need 10. You only need 10 signatures. And want to make sure you get extra. I know our town clerk is here. The verification of the signatures can sometimes be difficult, or they can't be verified. So if you only got 10 and one of them happens to not be a registered voter in town, you can run into problems. So extra signatures are a very smart move. And when you're thinking about what form to use, the select board office in town hall, and I think online, the forms that you'll need to create a warrant article or begin the process, I think are available starting this Friday when the warrant opens December 8th. So if you look on the site now, I don't think it's there, but it'll be available from December 8th when it opens, like I said, till the end of the last Friday in January. But you want to get started on it if you can get it and get to it in December. The more time you can provide yourself and anybody like me, town staff, that you're going to look to help for, that's helpful and recommended. The template. So this is kind of the typical language that you'd see on a warrant article to see if the town will vote to whatever. Establish a committee that outlines its duties and powers and set forth its composition. Another example, to amend Article Title 5, Article 10, yard sales. Vote to require registration of saxophones and violins. And then every warrant article is usually concluded with or taking action related thereto, which allows some flexibility for the body at town meeting to consider matters that are related. They have to be within scope of the original article language, but it may not be exactly what your warrant article is. Here's the timeline, and we've talked about this a bit as we've gone through these slides, but before the warrant opens, you can consult with town council. I'm happy to talk to money. I really do enjoy this stuff. Town officials, as I mentioned, it's very helpful depending on the subject that you're considering. You can reach out to a particular town board or town officer, and I'm happy to recommend somebody if you're not sure who that is. You can do that anytime. You can do that now, even prior to the warrant opening. As the warrant opens the first week of December, as I mentioned, that's this Friday, and it'll end the last Friday of January. So if you don't have your warrant article submitted to the select board's office prior to that, you'll have to wait until the next one. Warrant article hearings. So after you submit them, at the end of January, the select board, the redevelopment board, the finance committee will conduct hearings on all the applicable articles. They'll be sent out. So if it's a budgetary matter, it'll be sent to the finance committee. If it's a zoning article, it'll be sent to the redevelopment board. If it's a matter of general legislative power relative to the bylaws, the select board will get that. And there'll be several nights scheduled for those hearings, and you'll have whoever the proponent is usually invited to appear and present whatever the information they want the board to consider related to their warrant article, and then the board considers it and takes a vote and creates draft motion language at that time. Town meeting starts the third Monday in April, which I believe is the 22nd of 2024 this year.
It's the fourth Monday.
Fourth Monday?
Yeah.
So I think last year we did, and Len, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think was it 8 nights?
Oh,
more?
I don't remember.
So typically it'll go every Monday and Wednesday until the business is complete. And it can go a decent amount of time. Usually you'll have some note if you have a warrant article that you're particularly interested in. Usually have some notice about when that's going to be taken up, and the moderator sets a pretty decent schedule. But you can't know for sure. But so the best practice is just to always be there, because plus it's also just great. And then this timeline I talked about at the beginning. So anything that's approved, town or zoning bylaws, have to be subject to review by the Attorney General's Municipal Law Unit. I believe that their clerk has 30 days to forward those, and then I think they have 90 days at the AG's office to consider them. And after that, they're either become part of our bylaws or they don't, if they conflict with state law. Special legislation will go right to our legislative delegation, who do a great job in Arlington and in filing that timely and pursuing it. I've spoken to all those representatives and our senator and Cindy Friedman, and they do a great job. Approved budgets and appropriations, those have to go in those go into effect 7 days after the dissolution of the meeting. And last year we ran, I think it was last year or the year before, I don't remember, Len, but we ran into a little bit of an issue because we want to make sure that we're bumping up against the fiscal year, which is July 1. So hopefully it can be efficient. Local options and resolutions, they become effective immediately. So those are the ones we talked about where the state has given us the opportunity to take advantage of something that's been approved at the state level. How an idea becomes a warrant article. Look at all those happy faces at town meeting there. Outlining the problem and potential solutions. Is it within the town's jurisdiction? So these are questions that you should ask and we should ask together if you want to, about whether your idea is appropriate for town meeting consideration. Is the issue addressable by town bylaws, zoning bylaw, or special act? Are there mechanisms in place to address it? Town policy and other manager or select board, town committee or commission, state action, then formulate a draft article. So usually I think it's good practice, we talk about warrant articles, to create that 2 or 3 sentence warrant article that we have that kind of captures the big picture. And then I think it's good practice, and most people do this, and if you don't, I'll do it for you. Create a draft motion that would be something that would be considered by the applicable board at the time of its hearing. So it kind of sets out more explicitly what we're trying to do. And I would want to work with the proponent on that just to make sure that it really represents your idea. I'm not here to advocate for anything, bylaw or another. I'm simply here to help anyone who's interested through the process and make sure that the language is correct. It's appropriate. It's within the scope. It's within the boundaries of local authority and jurisdiction. But that I want to make sure that as long as those other prerequisites have been satisfied, that it accurately represents your idea and concept. Pre-warrant, contact town council. These things I've already mentioned. And then there's some other bullet points about agreement from town boards officials, potential areas of disagreement, scope of the article, issue addressable as legal feasible. We've talked about those, and I think the next slide, finalizing it. And I think these are important issues to consider. I think it's really helpful. And you think of yourself as a legislator, you want to build a coalition to the extent you can. If you have an idea that's good, you want to bring people on board. The more people that you can get to support that article from the beginning, I think the more likely that it's going to have success. And I think that's a good skill to have. And I think a lot of these town meeting members that I've seen do a really good job of that. Last point, remember the article is not your motion, and motion may not be yours. The motion is really controlled by the relevant boards. And this may be your idea, but it can be substituted. It can be included in a different way. I don't want to discourage people in the process, but make sure you understand how this works. The article is not your motion. And that's it. Sorry if I rushed a little bit, but I wanted to make sure that we leave plenty of time for anybody who's got questions or particular thoughts. If there are questions about that slideshow, I'm happy to try and answer them as well. But Len, did you want to? You can
Sure.
moderate.
Sure, I'll call people as they raise their hand. And we got a nice little showing here, so I think we'll just be respectful. The desire of other people to talk and keep our questions succinct. So Phil.
Yeah, hi there. Thanks, Len, and thanks, Michael. Good presentation. I am a town meeting member in precinct number 7, and I've been in town meeting for a number of years, but I've just never gotten around to trying to draft a warrant article. But I have some ideas that I'm just kind of brewing in my head. But one thing I wanted to ask is, in warrant articles that relate to budgets of particular departments, would the warrant article then, or can a warrant article in essence say, the Department of Planning and Community Development or the Department of Public Works or whatever, that they are to do X project or Y project, and then if that passes in the following fiscal year, then the director of that agency needs to put that line item into their budget? Or does something like that need to go through FinCom first? And then it gets kind of programmed in as a capital project? Or does it go through the capital, what's it called? The capital budget committee? I forget the name of the other one.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering about, can a warrant article in essence instruct a department directly to spend money on one thing or another?
The short answer, Phil, it's a good question, is no. That type of budgeting power rests with the town manager, and he presents an annual budget that contains all of those particular departmental budgets within his or her budget that goes to the finance committee. So that type of power does not exist for warrant articles.
Okay. All right. So a warrant article can't direct the town manager to put anything in the budget.
Not particular related departmental issues. No, it doesn't have that budgeting power.
Okay. So is the best then? Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I'm sorry. Basically, town, as far as finance is concerned in the budget, the town meeting, it needs to approve the budget, but it doesn't have the authority to edit it by line item.
Yeah, I see. Okay. But I guess the best the town meeting could do through a warrant article process is have a resolution that says, we town meeting feel that the town should fund X, Y, or Z. I guess that's the best that can be done.
Or even if you can't do something by warrant article, you could always voice, as a town meeting member or any citizen could attend finance committee meetings when they're considering the budget and voice concerns if you had a particular issue that related to a particular department.
Okay.
And then you can ask, you're entitled to town meeting, as you've probably seen in the past, Phil, you're entitled to ask questions at town meeting when the budget comes up. And that's usually where people get those points across. I've noticed in my 3 years here and other town meetings that I've attended that are elected town meetings, people can, ask that there's a budget night for town meeting and people can ask questions related to particular department budgets. And even if you can't strike something or instruct the town to spend specific money in a way, simply by asking questions, you can make your point about how you feel things could best be spent.
Yeah. If I can ask a follow-up then, since there's no other hands up, this is probably before. What's up?
I said that's fine. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, okay. It's probably, I guess, this is before your time, Michael, but maybe Len, you remember. I just recall it was probably 3 or 4 years ago, maybe a town meeting where town meeting voted to fund, I think it was $250,000 for the expansion or the introduction of blue bike stations in Arlington. How was that different than, or how did we get that through? It sounds like it did that because that went through the FinCom process first.
Yeah.
I guess, and it was in FinCom's budget. Okay,
yeah,
that's right.
I was in there. Yeah, or
that makes sense.
I guess maybe I wouldn't say it was in their budget, but that they said that an article, if it's deemed to be a financial article, it goes before FinCom, and then FinCom can recommend action or no action on it, and I don't know if it's technically correct for me to say it's in their budget, but that if town meeting votes for it, then it's incumbent upon the town to come up with the money for it, but but don't take what I said here like 100% certain, because normally I would say, how do you say, check with FinCom or check with town council on that. So we have town council here. Am I right about that?
Yeah, Len, I mean, they mostly, but they don't have to come up with the money, but there could be funding sources available for which you seek an allocation of that funding, and that could be an article that could go to finance committee. I'm talking. I thought your question, Phil, was mostly related to or directly talking about the town budget itself. But extra funding and state grant funding that might be available, that could be something that could be the subject of an article that could end up before the FinCom.
Well, that was his initial question, Michael. I mean, his second question was one that was related to a big ticket item, that was independent, of the budget with respect to the warrant. So, all right, Alex T.
Hey there. Good evening. Thank you for hosting this. This is very educational for me. Two questions. One is I'm kind of curious if you give me a sense of both the level of effort and as well as the number of iterations that a sponsor, someone with the idea, should prepare to invest in order to kind of get it through the process. So
It
that's
really,
question one.
yeah, I'll take that one first, Alex. It really depends how complicated an issue it is. I know that I can say that the leaf blower warrant article was required quite a few tweaks.
Mhm.
Um, and it's still kind of a little cumbersome at this point, as it was passed. But you might have something simple that's it just amends. You might want to change how much the fine is for whatever in the bylaws, and that can be a two-word motion, and that could be one iteration, and it's done.
Oh, okay.
If you've got a bigger scale issue, that could be several drafts going back and forth. And again, I think it's important, Alex, that my role is to make sure that the form is correct, but I want to make sure that whatever it is accurately reflects your idea.
Okay, and then maybe I'll share the context behind at least an idea. Is my immediate community has been adjacent to a very large scale development over the past 2 years, and it's been a tremendous amount of burden for our community. And given Arlington's aspirations to grow dramatically and grow our housing stock, I think the act in general is, or what we have in mind is, how do we kind of define how do developers be good neighbors, right? They're kind of guests in our community while they're building these things. And right now, there's not a lot of teeth or accountability where they have not necessarily been living up consistently to to what they agreed upon with the zoning board. And so I think the idea is to bring more transparency through kind of public documentation of violations, and to have some teeth where there's some accountability there if they don't adhere to these things. Because again, there are these chronic issues that it just feels like we're screaming into the void. And even when following up with the town, there's just kind of no action really. And so it's more along the lines of transparency and trying to build some level of accountability into while they're neighbors of ours.
So on that question, Alex, I think I would look to the zoning bylaws and maybe perhaps even the town bylaws and what enforcement provisions exist in those. You can't try and create a warrant article that deals with a specific developer. It's got to be,
Of course.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like I said, that's a spot zone. You got to deal with a town-wide issue, and as long as your thought pertains to town-wide,
Yes.
and there could be something in the enforcement provisions that might create the type of transparency that you're seeking, or perhaps would increase penalties for those who don't comply with particular orders. Those are the types of issues, and that's the review of the zoning bylaws for those types of provisions, or maybe even the actual regular bylaws, might be helpful in giving us a direction about what could be done there.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like the ship has sailed on our opportunity here. So it's more about kind of helping our future neighborhoods kind of
I
better
think
manage that chaos.
oftentimes the types of warrant articles that end up happening are born from that type of experience. So maybe something you have a familiarity with because you went through it, and although like you said, the development's already there. It may be helpful to others who haven't yet experienced that, and you could, I don't know if you're a town meeting member, but you don't have to be. You could potentially help somebody else.
Right. Thank you.
And but I do see a question from Catherine Severs, and I'll get to you, Peter. It says, how does the select board handle duplicate similar warrants, we mean articles here, and opposing articles? It's hard to know the vibe in the town or what kinds of what kind of pilot programs are in the pipeline, or even where in the pipeline they are. Yes, that's true. So what you do is you have to ask someone, and so you can always ask a member of the select board, or all of them, all of us, or you can ask the town manager, to find out this information you just can't possibly know on your own, and then based on that, it would help you determine whether or not you wanted to submit an article. If duplicate articles appear in the warrant, well, we process them. If it is truly duplicate, the chair of the select board along with town council, and sometimes well, all the times, representative from FinCom will determine the sequence of articles in the warrant. And so if there is a duplicate, when they get to the second one, we simply say it's a duplicate, and either we would say positive action on it, but more likely we would say no action because there's an article before it. But that specific case has not come up, so I'm not exactly sure what we would do. But I see Mr. Cunningham's hand going up.
Oh, good points, Len. And I think that I can appreciate Catherine's sentiment. It is hard to know what's going on all the time in every particular pilot program. And I don't think it's reasonable to expect everyone to know that. Catherine, I'm sure like everyone else, you've got a ton going on. And that's, as Len said, it's appropriate to rely on town staff and elected officials to help you understand what's going on. To the extent that I agree with Len, I haven't seen an instance where there've been duplicate, very extremely similar warrant articles. Each would be entitled to a hearing, as Len suggested. It wouldn't be entitled to that. I think that, in my view, though, I think that'd be a prime opportunity to try and come to agreement. If you've got a similar warrant, you may be able to build that coalition we talked about, where you maybe somebody withdraws there and you could consolidate, combine it together, make it even stronger. The fact that you're both proponents would increase the warrant article's chance of success. I think that'd be a real opportunity to work with someone else in your community on a joint issue, and that'd be, to me, that's a good thing.
Yeah, and then when it came before town meeting, whichever one decided to combine with the other one, would just the select board would vote no action on it, and it would be disposed of at town meeting that way, because everything on the warrant has to be disposed of in order for us to close out town meeting. In the case of opposing articles, well, yeah, we would just hear them individually and vote positive action on one or the other, or no action on both. I don't think we both vote positive action on both of them unless we wanted the town to explode.
Typically, Len and Catherine, we would see that coming, because these, the deadline for submitting warrant articles is towards the end of January, and the hearings don't begin for a month or so after that. And so we'd know that exists, and there'd be an opportunity prior to the hearings to look at the draft motion language for each and suggest. I'd probably be in contact with the proponents and say, is there an opportunity for us to consolidate these and make this even stronger by coming together, and that way avoid putting any board in a position where they have competing or similar articles that they have to deal with. But again, the proponents would control the direction on that, and I would certainly, if individuals wanted to maintain their own separate tracks, they're entitled to do that, and then the board would have to deal with it, as Len suggested.
But I think her case, the second one she posed, though, were opposing. So this wouldn't even be a matter of bringing them together to combine forces.
Opposing, we can't combine forces, and they would just they would each get their own hearing, and then they would be competing against each other, and that's how it works.
Yeah, it's the process. So Mr. Fiore.
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to thank you, Mr. Diggins, Mr. Cunningham, Ms. Brazil, and anybody else that's on that was behind this. I mean, I had a general understanding of the process, but this gave me a more detailed understanding, and that's what I was looking for. And so again, I just want to thank you for hosting this.
Oh, well, you're welcome. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Let's get thumbs up. Yeah. So.
Okay, can I just editorialize before Paul asks? I think that's the reason what we see tonight, and what I've seen in the last 3 years. Arlington's just a different type of community. Its population is more engaged than most I've seen. The boards and commissions are extremely strong in terms of the people. The town meeting members take it very seriously. The citizen engagement group that we've got here tonight, this turnout is, I'm very impressed. People care about this stuff. We don't have a town meeting until next April, and we've got a number of people asking questions about the process. And I'm continually impressed by the town of Arlington and its citizenry, of how seriously they take this process and how important it is to the community. I really appreciate it.
Yes. apparently why we have some of the longer town meetings in the Commonwealth. And to answer your question, our last ATM, was 7 nights, so I went to the website. I didn't want to say, I didn't want to speculate when I could know the answer with a few keystrokes.
Yeah, I could tell you, some towns get theirs in, it's 1 or 2 nights, and but that's not a bad thing. People want to deliberate, people want to make sure these issues are fully vetted, and that's not a bad thing.
Tend to have more articles too than most, although a lot of them are boilerplate's not the right word, just pro forma, just things that we have to do.
And that's a good segue then just to town meeting in general. Those types of items, typically they try and combine into what's called a consent agenda. So if in the spring we have 80 articles on the warrant, 10 are not controversial in any way. Usually the moderator will ask the town meeting body if all can agree to consider them as one item as a consent agenda, and that can usually knock off 10 or 12 warrant articles that are pro forma, as Len suggested, pro forma, and don't require any debate. I think that's a good mechanism that, and usually I think the diligence of town meeting members is evident, and people have reviewed the warrant and understand that these particular 10 or 12 topics might not require further review in the town. The town meeting membership can just approve them as part of the consent agenda. It's a helpful mechanism and could save us a night.
And if you want some ideas about how certain issues have been handled, you can also look on the town's website on the town meeting page, and there is a repository of previous warrants. I strongly suggest that you go to the annotated warrant because that has the main motion. But if you want a quick read, you just get the PDF of the warrant, and that'll give you a sense of what people have thought of doing. And then if you want to research more to see the substance, the real substance of their idea and how it was deliberated, I think you'd probably be interested in those that didn't make it through the process in order to get a sense of how your article could be better and stand a better chance of getting positive action, not only from the select board, but also from town meeting. And Michael, did you discuss the substitute motion process? I know you mentioned it, but did you discuss that in detail?
I didn't discuss it in detail. That's a procedural process that can be utilized at town meeting itself. So, for instance, if you had in our warrant article that was, again, I'll use something simple like to increase the dog license fee to whatever, and the select board heard it and did not, and they said we vote, no action on this. So technically, there's no real motion before town meeting. An individual town meeting member could seek to submit a substitute motion that would allow town meeting to try and consider it on the floor. It's not something that's used often, but it isn't a mechanism. And there are also the opportunities to try and amend draft motions that are on the floor of town meeting. We saw that quite a bit in the special town meeting in the fall. There were quite a few amendments to those zoning bylaw warrant articles, and those are more typical. So I think I'd say it's a procedural mechanism at town meeting itself, not something that we consider at any time prior to that.
Right. Gotcha. So Paul?
Yeah, hi, thanks. This is great. I just echo what others have said, and I really appreciate it. I guess I'm curious if you could, and maybe you touched on this and I missed it, but if you could characterize the type or level of scrutiny that the select board applies to warrant articles before recommending action or no action. Is it sort of like we like this affirmatively, or we just feel that this passes a baseline threshold for appropriateness and we want to pass it on to town meeting to look at in more detail?
Paul, that can vary quite a bit. I mean, like I said, some matters are more controversial than others. And for instance, if you've got a warrant article that's before the select board, and again, we've got a member here, but that there may be a hearing that takes only 5 minutes and it's clear the select board as membership is in support, they don't have many questions for the proponent who's there, ready, all geared up to answer questions, and spent, days creating a slideshow that they provided to the select board and presentation, and then the select board just, they clearly, they may thank the proponent for the presentation, but they may not ask any difficult questions. Contrary to that, you could have a situation where the select board has significant concerns, and they may ask questions that take place and could go on for half an hour or more. And you've got to, as a proponent, you've got to be there ready to answer those questions and address the concerns that the board may have. And those are things that hopefully will get flushed out in the process. If you have concerns about that and you've got a warrant article, I could potentially alert you to those in advance of a hearing. Things that I think the board might be concerned with, but I don't know for sure. But in general, that's going to be the job of the proponent to respond to those concerns. But it can vary quite a bit. But I've seen the hearings go, and Len could comment more intelligently. But I've seen those go from a 5-minute hearing to, like I said, half hour, 45 minutes.
And the more technical it is, then the more we feel that it has to cross the threshold of being correct. And so that the advice that we give town meeting with respect to positive action, no action, is good advice. When they're less technical and more, how can I say this? More. It's not so much a matter of just being policy, because it's all pretty much policy. But I guess I'm just going to contrast it with less technical. And it does fall into that realm of we're not absolutely certain about how we feel one way or another about it. Then we might just say, send this town meeting, it passes the threshold. But to be honest, the threshold is just its existence, because it's going to town meeting. It's just really a matter whether it goes to town meeting with a recommendation from us of positive action or no action. And so sometimes we don't want to say no action because we don't really want to, put that, put it in a negative light. So sometimes we'll just say, okay, just let it go with positive action. And if town meeting wants to bat it down, then that's fine, but we won't put our thumb on the scale negatively. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I mean, it sounds like you see it as, how to put it? It's not always like the seal of approval as much as it is like, we don't have a problem with this. And like, you can do what you want with it. But then sometimes if you do have a problem with it, you'll take it off the table completely.
Yeah, I would say no action.
No action, which is kind of almost tantamount, it sounds like, to taking it off the table in most cases.
Yeah. Our track record with town meetings pretty good, but then again, the issues generally aren't that tough, and so I think even without our recommendation, town meeting would probably vote the same way. We're just doing their homework for them, and I should say our homework, because all of us currently are town meeting members, so we get to eat our own cooking.
Fair enough. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I'll just add to that, Paul. I think that at the hearings, the select board is very, very fair, very respectful. They hear people out, even if they do have issues with the particular warrant article. It's a process that's worth pursuing, and it's not too arduous. But it does require some time and in preparation. But as long as you're prepared and ready to go, the select board's it's a very fair and civil process.
Got it. Thank you very much.
Well, it's 8:25. And hi. Yeah, Julie.
So I would love to just encourage people to look at the town meeting website at the encouragement of Teresa Marzilli, the town's community engagement coordinator who works in the DEI division. I've expanded sort of background information to give people more tools, more FAQs, more answers to some of these questions. If there's anything that you think that you find confusing, I'm happy to add it and try to clarify more and expand. You know, I've got a decent starting place, but there's always room for improvement. And so I certainly encourage people to email me and just let me know if there's something that we could explain better. Because Mike can't do this week after week after week as you dig into it and start having your questions. And we want to have as much information available to help you navigate the process as possible.
Just to back up our town clerk's point on that, I mean, I even today in preparation for this event tonight, on that particular town meeting section of the website, Julie, I found how to submit a warrant for the art. It's how to submit an article for the warrant, which is a 2-page helpful document, and then there's an article about town meeting that gives you a lot of links and information. The town website really is an excellent resource. I know I talked about the foundation, the 3 legal documents on there, the zoning bylaws, the town bylaws, and the town manager act. Those are the foundation upon which everything works. But the ancillary information that's available to people to help them through the process is all there, and it's great. And then if you have any questions, you can let me know.
And to the person that asked earlier about how much time should one expect to have to invest in the process, and you probably touched on this, Michael. For the zoning articles, I would strongly advise that you try to have a conversation, with at least one, but no more than 2 members of the zoning board in advance, in order to get a sense of when you need to start having conversations with the full board about just the subject matter, not necessarily your article, because they are complex, the issues, and so the more you can have those conversations with them, the sooner you can have those conversations with them, then the better. And they can help guide you with respect to how to even formulate, your article. And as Michael pointed out, the article itself, doesn't have to be the main motion, but the article has to be worded in such that your main motion can fit in it, especially once you get advice about what that main motion should be. So that's my strong advice on the zoning articles. And those tend to be the ones that people care about the most, meaning that as a resident, I'll just leave it at resident for now. Usually those are the things that the issues that you care about usually fall in the realm, of zoning. That's it. And
I'd also like,
go ahead, Julie. Yeah.
I'd also just like to remind people, if you can convince a board or a committee or a department head that your idea is fabulous and useful, they can put your idea on the warrant and do all the work. So it's great to have the idea, go talk to people. You may not have to do all the work yourself. Town meeting members aren't obliged to write articles. And if residents can find a committee that's excited to back the idea, then that gives you that cohort that Michael was talking about. It's great to have friends and allies when you're bringing your idea before town meeting. So that's just another thought. There may be an easier way for you to do it.
Thanks, Phil. See you later. And Julie, do you see Mr. Selker's very silly question in the chat? Yeah.
So let's look at the silly question.
The
answer is no. We can correct that. Anything that is an obvious typo, a cut and paste garbage character thing, we can just fix.
Scrivener's error. And it's yeah. I'm sure that's not the only one, Paul.
I'll email it to you.
Well,
good find, Paul.
Well, we don't have to run until 9 o'clock. And certainly, all of us, by us, I mean Mr. Cunningham, being the clerk, Ms. Brazil, and myself, as well as my colleagues on the select board, are always available. Just keystrokes and a phone call away. And so feel free to reach out. I love ideas, and concepts, and I even like complaints, and so if something I don't like or something you think can be done better, send them along. And I'm very much into problem solving because I didn't like to abstract that solution into policy, so with that, folks, unless someone has another question, I'll just thank you all for joining us. Thank our town council for this presentation and answers to the questions. And
thank you very much to Mr. Diggins for setting this up. I really appreciate it, and thank you to all of you for your participation. And thanks for having me. I really do like being here, and I enjoy the interaction and your interest. It really is appreciated.
Thank you.
Okay. Take care, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.